Born in Mansfield, Ohio, Richard Cox bravely volunteered for service in the United States Army after graduating from high school. 2 years originally joining the Army's Gendarmerie force in Germany, he was assigned to the West Point Military Academy in New York, arriving in January 1948. Almost exactly 2 years after his arrival at West Point, the second-year cadet would disappear under mysterious circumstances after signing out one evening to go to a restaurant on the grounds. On Saturday, January 7th, 1950, at 4:45 p.m., Cox's classmate, in charge of quarters, Peter Haynes, received a phone call from someone named George, asking for Cox, in a tone that was rough and patronizing, almost insulting. After Haynes told the man that Cox was not in his room, George issued the following response. "Well, look, when he comes in, tell him to come down here to the hotel. Just tell him George called. He'll know who I am. We knew each other in Germany. I'm just here for a little while, and tell him I'd like to get him a bite to eat." 45 minutes later, at 5:30, a man entered Grant Hall, an area where cadets could meet guests, and asked to see Cox in person. The visitor was described as having a fair complexion and wearing a belted trench coat but no hat. Cox and the unidentified man apparently shook hands upon meeting with one witness, saying Cox seemed happy to see him. Cox signed out, officially indicating he would have dinner off campus, but as he would later reveal to his roommates, he and the man actually drank from a bottle of whiskey in the guy's parked car. The next morning, Richard talked about the man to his roommates, saying he was a former US Army Ranger who had served in the same unit as he had in Germany. Cox also told his buddies that the man liked to brag about killing Germans during the war, and that he had boasted about cutting off their private parts afterwards. That Sunday afternoon, Cox signed out again to meet the man and would return at about 4:30 p.m. Interestingly, later in the week, he remarked that he hoped he wouldn't have to see the fellow again. The rest of the next week was without incident, until Cox was seen talking with a man on Saturday, the 14th, thought to be George. Though the description told by one witness did not fit the description given of the man who came to see Cox at Grant Hall, this man was described as dark-haired and rough-looking. Cox later returned to his room, telling his roommates he was going to dine with the visitor again later that night. Cox and the visitor left the grounds of the academy and have not been seen since. Police, FBI, and CID got involved in the search efforts and used both air and ground searches to check the reservoir, river, and pond. After 2 months of an extensive manhunt, nobody was ever found. It should be noted that Cox left behind $87 in his room, as well as a family and fiancée whom he planned to marry after his graduation. As for George, a search of Army records only led to individuals who could not have been at West Point at the time of the disappearance. So what happened to Richard Colvin Cox? Why did he run off with some man on the night of his disappearance? Who is George and what is his involvement? 50 years later, it seems we still have a lot more questions than answers. Retired U.S. Coast Guard officer named Ernest J. Shotwell Jr. said in an on-camera interview that he had had a conversation with Cox at the Washington, D.C. Greyhound Lines bus station. 2 years after his disappearance, he described Cox as uncomfortable and said he was vague about his plans for the immediate future. At the time, Ernest did not know Cox was missing and hadn't seen him since they had been classmates at the USMA preparatory school at Stewart Field. Is it possible Cox was unhappy and decided to start a new life somewhere? His conversations with a man in the week leading up to his disappearance could have just been him venting frustration with an old friend who ultimately convinced him to leave behind his old life. The validity of the Cox sighting by Shotwell has not been confirmed, and no other evidence has been found to definitively prove or disprove his theory. Mansfield News Journal reporter named Jim Underwood, who had written a 12-installment series on the Cox mystery, interviewed a high school acquaintance of Cox named Ralph E. Johns, who said that he and another man, William McKee, grew very interested in the Cox case and had frequent contact with FBI officials about it. According to Johns, one former agent told him that the FBI had been within 24 hours of grabbing Cox, and he couldn't understand why the FBI would not let them pick him up or why they pulled them off the case. Johns therefore speculated that Cox might have gone into some secret government agency, such as the CIA, and that his disappearance might have been a cover for some classified assignment. He also clarified that it was just mere speculation, as again, no evidence has been found to back this claim up. Obviously, George's appearance just a week before Cox's disappearance seems more than coincidental. It is possible that Cox and his visitor had some kind of disagreement which could have ended violently. Remember, Cox did share several vicious stories of George and his time in Germany. And he also did say he wished to never speak with that man again after the second visit. Without a body, forensic evidence, or a confession, there's no way to know if foul play was involved. Many more theories have emerged, including that he got lost somewhere in the surrounding woods and succumbed to hypothermia, and another that says his roommates may have made up some of the details to hide their own involvement, or as a way to cover for the friend who could have wanted to stage his own disappearance. At this time, nobody can say for certain what happened to Cox, or who or what may have been involved.